I'm Mackayla. Welcome to the Soundtrack of Our Lives podcast. We're going to jump right in with the two hardest questions of all. Who are you and what have you been up to recently?
So my name is Sure. I sing and play in guitar in Scarborough. And recently really just been gearing up for the release of our new record, Hate Season.
So that's super exciting.
Indeed, indeed.
What kinds of things have you guys been doing to prepare?
So we have a couple of shows lined up. We have a record release show on May 1st at Main Drag Brooklyn. So we've just been sort of fine tuning the set for that.
Mhm.
And then a couple of shows that we got coming up after that to support the record. Doing wonderful podcasts like this and just being able to get out there and talk about the record and everything that went into making it. So yeah, lots of promotional stuff.
Mhm. So you mentioned a show. For somebody who hasn't seen you guys live, what can they expect?
Definitely a high energy blast of music. We have a tendency to, we knock out maybe usually around like 16 songs in 27 minutes, and
Wow.
we don't waste a lot of time chatting. We really like to sort of have a workout whenever we play and just make sure that we give the audiences, the most sort of authentic Scarborough experience we can possibly deliver.
So not so you don't need to go to the gym if that's your workout then.
Yeah, exactly. It become Scarborough for us has become gym and therapy all in one. It's
That's
good time.
helpful.
Yeah, yeah,
Less money spent.
absolutely.
What did it look like when you guys were writing this album?
So, it was rough. Only in the sense that, like, this is a pretty personal record, and it touches on some, sort of heavy stuff. It's really capturing a period in my life that is sort of a healing journey of,
Hmm.
kind of, it captures a time when I sort of walked away from the political career that I was working with or working in. Some mental health struggles that I had gone through that I've been pretty open about discussing. And, the music itself and writing the record itself also sort of helped process all of that
Hmm.
time, because we had gone into hiatus because in 2020 I ran for Congress. It was only supposed to be sort of a couple of months off, but it ended up
Yeah.
turning into like 4 years of not playing. And a lot happened in that period of time, and so writing this record sort of was sort of a catharsis and being able to kind of unpack everything that happened in that period of time. And it took a little bit under a year to write,
Hmm.
but we were able to get it all in there, and it was just also a lot of fun at the same time. I think it's one of the most collaborative things that we've ever done as a band. Normally I just kind of bring in the skeletons, and the meat gets thrown on, and that becomes the bulk of what we do. But this one, really, I think, showcases everybody in the band's talent, and all of their feedback and input was put into it. So it ended up being a really fun project to do.
That's awesome. So, do you think you'll ever go on hiatus again, or are you kind of all in right now?
No, definitely all in. It was a very intentional. I mean, for me personally, it was, an intentional walking away from sort of the career path
Hmm.
and wanting to do this. I mean, not to get like, too dreary, but like when you're actually on the inside of it all, and all I will say is that there's nothing that's happening today that is a surprise to me.
Hmm.
And it was a very intentional decision to go, time is running out here. I love doing music. I've never been able to just go all in on it.
Yeah.
This is where I'm going to dedicate my energy while the sun sets on the American Empire.
That's a very valid way to feel.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm glad that you were able to chase your passions.
Yeah, I mean, I think that especially like, I'm a little bit older than everybody else in the band. I know that this can seem strange for sort of the normal people in my life, but like I'm very much a believer in trying to make the most out of this life as we can, and not
Hmm.
sort of being necessarily reined in by sort of the expectations or what you should be doing or what you think you should be doing. Look, I understand we all have to survive, and I get that, but at the same time, it seems kind of crazy to me that we sort of just jump into this world and all of a sudden are defined by, you know, having to have a particular educational path, or,
Hmm.
have to go down a particular career path. And this is sort of the thing, and not realizing that that's not built in or hard coded into the world or the universe in any way,
Right.
right? These are constructs that sort of support systems and benefit others more than the vast majority of us.
Hmm.
And you know, it was a difficult sort of choice to make, but you only get one shot at this. And
Right.
it's not like I have tons of expectations about where we're going to end up with this project, but I think it was more important to be honest about wanting to be able to fully throw oneself into chasing something that you've always been passionate about, that you've loved doing, and being able to really do it in a really sort of freeing way.
Yeah, I think everybody should at least experience that once, even if it ends up, they try and they're like, oh, maybe that's not for me, but you have to experience it, I think.
Yeah, because you don't want to go around life with the what ifs,
Hmm.
and it's better to, even if the answer isn't exactly what you thought it was going to be, better to go down that path than never at all. Because I think life is too short to walk around with a ton of regrets in your pocket.
Yeah. And if you try, you never know what could happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just like the short time you spent with your political career, you would have questioned what could have happened if you didn't try it.
Oh yeah, no doubt in that. I mean, like that, and that's why I think it was kind of such a big deal walking away from that, because it's like, while the running part was short, like the lifetime building up to that, like I mean, I
Hmm.
spent my entire career working. I started working for a state senator, eventually ended up working for someone in Congress, but then I just spent like 10 years in the nonprofit advocacy
Yeah.
space, communications work for orgs. So it's like, there was a very specific pathway that was leading to that. Um and so, to be able to spend so much of your life and dedicate so much of your life to a particular thing, and then have to kind of face reality about it, and make different decisions. It's not easy, but it's important then to be
Hmm.
able to kind of follow where you think your heart is leading you, because it's very easy to get stuck in that, like, well, this is what I'm supposed to do, so I guess I'm just going to have to
Yeah.
keep going at this, even though I don't see a future in this, like, not necessarily even just like in the electoral space, but just in the work that
Hmm.
I care about and was doing, given sort of the state of things. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's also like once you've done however many years of school you end up doing, and then you're just like thrown into the world, you've prepared for life to be one way, and then it's completely different.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And like, even more so now, like I joke, with my wife that like my degrees right now are like the world's most expensive toilet paper, just because, and I have a BA in poli sci, a master's in public policy, and in public administration, but like, all of those frameworks, all of those theories, all of sort of like the institutions, that the mechanics of how that operates are built on a structure that right now no longer exists and
Hmm.
are not coming back. And so, yeah, it is kind of crazy, sort of how, like, what expectation versus reality, I guess, is the best way to do it. And
Right.
right now, that's kind of like the most extreme version of it, but absolutely, I hear that.
Yeah, I think in reality there are very few jobs that I think you really need to actually 100% like go to school for. Like I want my doctors and my surgeons and all those people to have gone to school for it. But, not everything else you need to go to school for.
Yeah. And like, and it's just being able to put value, or being able to like fully value the importance of things that people are doing that keep,
Hmm.
society afloat. Like, I think we tend to have this weird view in this country about like what a degree means, and like the status associated with that, and not realize the importance of like the labor that goes to keep the lights on and the water flowing
Yeah.
in our homes. That is, in my mind, more important than anything in the world,
Right.
and so, yeah, I don't
Because if we don't have that, then everyone's going to be miserable and they're going to
know.
complain. And
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, it's tough.
it's not until you like kind of work behind the scenes. Because I work in a senior living facility. I do activities, but I work closely with all the other departments. So it's what you're talking about, like keeping their lives going.
Right. And it's like the most important part. Like, I mean, I think that in this country we get brought up with this idea of like the rugged individual, and it's a fine concept. But it's not reality. We all
Yeah.
are dependent on each other, and like, with any one missing piece, like the whole house of cards kind of falls down. So, and you see it in the same thing in like in the music industry. I think, we try to kind of be as humble as possible and be as
Hmm.
easy to work with, whether it's with, promoters or other bands we work, because we realize that, we're part of an ecosystem, and,
Right.
everybody's playing an important role, and there's a lot of unsung heroes in this business of ours, for lack of a better word, that go unseen, but we wouldn't be able to do what we do if it weren't for them. So yeah,
Yeah. There's really no unimportant jobs ever.
absolutely.
It can feel like it at times,
Sure, sure.
but it's not unimportant. I think
Agreed.
people forget about that.
Yeah, yeah. Because we just get consumed by, and I think specifically in our culture where, what we do becomes so embedded as part of our identity,
Hmm.
which is it's sort of an unfortunate thing that, hopefully we learn to grow out of.
Yeah. It's like you're a musician, you're a rock star, you're supposed to like my grandma was like, "Well, make sure you stay away from drugs and alcohol." I'm like, "Okay."
Yeah,
Like
that
it's
that
not really like that. It's just a couple people like it.
sure. It's like in any way, I mean, like, good luck going into a hospital and looking through the medical staff and think you're not going to run into the same level of thing. I mean, I think
Right.
it's
Anyone can drink and do drugs.
sure. A lot of people, especially in this day and age, like, and they're finding ways to cope with the difficulties of this reality. Like,
Yeah.
it's hard to judge.
I know. It's interesting like how a few people can kind of define what everybody thinks about a certain career.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, I keep going back to it. Like, I mean, I think we get told so many stories and so many things that, like, folks just don't really kind of realize how much of our worldview is just kind of shaped by these narratives that are kind of fed through us, whether through popular culture,
Hmm.
friends, family, whatever the case may be, that is just so divorced from what reality is. And I think, that's where, you end up having people that kind of like struggle. And we're at a really unique point in our country too, where so many of us are not operating in the same consensus reality, like it's, and, which I think adds to sort of the dilemma that we're in, that
Hmm.
eventually is going to have to sort itself out. But yeah,
Yeah. It's an interesting time to be alive.
yeah, yeah. Certainly interesting. As an elder millennial, it's I am getting tired with every new season, upping the ante here.
And it's interesting because I work with people who, they grew up like we just had a couple people pass away who are like who fought in World War II, and they were like they have such a different mindset
Yeah,
because the world was so different. And it's so interesting to see how different the mindset can be over not even that long a period of time.
yeah, yeah. It's crazy, and, like, I think we're seeing that sort of in super speed. Like, I mean, the gap between, I think, like, myself and like my youngest child, who's like Gen Alpha, like, it's a lot different than the relationship that I had with sort of my elders when
Hmm.
I was growing up, and like my great grandparents and great grandparents. Like, there's something going on where it just feels like everything's gone fast forward, and like the world has altered so differently. Like, I have the unique sort of experience of being part of the pre-digital and now the
Hmm.
post-digital world, and it's just like literally living in two different timelines. It's so strange in a way that, like, it wasn't the case in terms of, like, in between the generations prior to me, like the Gen Xers and the
Yeah.
Boom, or whatever the case may be. But yeah, I don't know.
I mean, I grew up. I think how I was. I remember when my mom like she got her first Palm Pilot and it could do email, and that was so exciting. And then I
Yeah,
remember when she got her first iPhone, and it's interesting because I still remember like summers of kind of being kicked out of the house or just spending outside all the time with my friends, being like, I don't even know if my mom knows where I am, but like
yeah,
she knows where I am,
yeah.
because the
Yeah, for sure.
neighborhood moms. And then my sister, who's 5 years younger than me, grew up totally different just because of the change in technology.
Yeah, I mean, it's played a huge role in sort of reshaping our society, our culture, just I mean everything. I mean, I could go on for forever just on how much I feel technology has sort of also helped lead us to where we are today.
Hmm.
Um and sort of separated us. Like when I was growing up, like there was so much hope that like the internet was going to become this thing where you would access all the information and you can speak to people across the world, and it was supposed to be this like unifying thing, but then the corporations have sort of gotten their clutches in there, and it's just become a million different echo chambers where you are the product. And
Hmm.
again, because of the way that we interface with it, for a lot of people in my generation, where it was sort of a social place, which that social place then became a data mining operation. You're not conscious of that when that shift
Yeah.
happens. You don't realize how all of a sudden what you're seeing, there's a reason behind what you're seeing, and
Yeah.
the and all of the passions and all of the things that come with it. Where because we all like to think, right, that we're all amazing critical thinkers, and like stuff happens, but we have all just been constantly bombarded with
Hmm.
certain messaging and certain whatever. Like we have been directed in certain ways to serve a system, and I don't mean that in like some weird conspiratorial way. Like I don't think there's like some boardroom somewhere
No.
where there's a cabal of folks that are intentionally directing it, but it's just that is the sort of the side effect, I guess, of trying
Hmm.
to serve like a corporate interest, right? When your interest is driven by profit, you don't think that whatever you're doing is quote unquote evil or whatever.
No.
You're just trying to direct more consumers to your fucking product or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. And I
But
can't
that,
blame anyone for wanting to make money.
yeah, I mean, it's how you choose to do it, I guess, that
Yes,
that
that's true.
counts, right? Because then you end up in a system where, you know, like I said, part of why I walked away from government is realizing that it's like the corporate capture was all but complete.
Hmm.
Um, and again, like it's not, like I said, not an evil cabal, but when you have so much money, and when you're seeing these corporations literally meeting with electeds and shaping policies that are being implemented at the state level that only benefit them and are not really representative of what people actually
Hmm.
want, um then you realize that like, oh, this is game over. Like, people no longer get to decide what policies are being implemented, at least not the ones that matter, right? Like
Right.
not the ones that are actually going to provide any type of benefit. And I think we then start to see that play out. And this is the inevitable reality of what happens when you have, a population that kind of checks out of any type of real civic participation, outside of showing up to vote every 4 years and consider that participating in democracy. And then the rest of the days, you have people that their interest again is to increase their own profit motives and are going to do whatever is necessary to do that.
Hmm.
And if that means, being able to instill policies that down the line end up becoming incredibly harmful to the rest of the population, so be it. And so anyway, I could go on forever that way. I don't want to bore you with it, but
So before I ask the last question, was there anything
sure.
else you wanted to mention or talk about today?
Oh no, I mean, just mostly one of the great things about putting together this record and being able to do Scarborough at this point is really being able to make the best of the time that we have. I know that it's a very heavy time, but like there still needs to be room to push back against that with whether it's art or whether it's volunteering in your community or whatever the case may
Hmm.
be, right? Anything that reminds you that you're human, that you're present, that you're still able to contribute. And so you know the main takeaway is just being wanting to let folks know that like you still gotta live a little. Yeah,
Yeah,
like as
it's
hard as things get.
important.
Yeah, it's important to live a little and be grounded in the present moment, and just treat each other nicely. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
treat each other nicely.
Okay, so our last question is, what is the soundtrack of your life?
Yeah, I mean the soundtrack of my life is a weird one. I think that music, obviously my relationship with music is no accident, and so like I can always think about like eras of my life and like particular genres that affected it. Even though I'm doing punk and hardcore now,
Hmm.
that's sort of the majority of the stuff that I listen to. But I was shaped by so many other different things. Like growing up, I'm half Puerto Rican, half Filipino, but grew up with my Puerto Rican half of the family. So there's a lot of like sort of that Caribbean salsa influence
Hmm.
that like that and like 80s freestyle shaped my earliest years. Like those are like the earliest memories that I have. A brief stint of like 90s East Coast hip hop before discovering punk rock and delving down that. And that
Hmm.
has been really, punk and hardcore has really kind of defined the adult years of my life. A good 20-30 years of that is what's playing in the back. So, that and then, the last few years where it has been just like so focused on writing
Hmm.
and getting back to doing our own music, that Scarborough itself has become part of that soundtrack, which is, it's a weird thing to say or think, but like I can think of certain songs that, like, because they were so personal and written about particular moments in my recent life, that, like, it does sort of define that era for me. So yeah.
It makes sense. You're writing your own soundtrack.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. It's kind of weird when I think about it that way.
So, for all our listeners who want to follow you guys, stay updated, maybe see you live, listen to the new album, where can they find you?
Yeah, so at Scarborough Punks, SCARBOROPUNX, across all social media, same handle.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Thank you, Mackayla. Really appreciate you. Thanks for having me on.
Of course, have a nice rest of your day.
You do take care. Bye bye.
Bye.